Zeke Rodriguez's day began, as most did, with a faint whiff of despair and coolant. Orbital Station Alpha was alive with its usual symphony of chaos, sparking wires, the groan of overstressed metal, and the hiss of gas leaks that never quite made the maintenance reports. Zeke, crouched over a power regulator that clearly hated him, muttered curses that could make a plasma welder blush. Bessie, his battered but trusty wrench, dangled from his grip like a seasoned soldier's rifle. She was scarred from years of battle with stubborn bolts and half-baked engineering, but she never let him down. Unlike, well, everyone else. You know, came a voice as smooth and smug as a corporate memo. If you adhered to the station's maintenance protocol, you wouldn't be elbow-deep in malfunctions every other day. Zeke didn't bother glancing at Lexi's avatar, a glowing teal orb floating nearby. Instead, he leaned harder into the bolt, teeth gritted. If you mention protocol one more time, I'm rewriting your code to make you communicate via shadow puppets. You lack the skill for that, Lexi retorted, her glow brightening in a way that felt annoyingly smug. Exactly. With a grunt, Zeke wrenched the bolt free, triumphant. Now buzz off and let me work. Unless you want to explain to the station why we're neck-deep in darkness and vacuum. A distant thud rattled the bay, shaking tools from shelves. Zeke froze. Another heavy-laden cargo hauler docking like it had been piloted by a drunken asteroid. I swear, I'm fixing those stabilizers next. Oh, wait, that's also my job. His bitter musings were interrupted by the bay's alarm blaring to life, bathing everything in blood-red light. Lexi's tone shifted, her synthetic warmth replaced by urgency. Priority alert, unidentified fleet inbound. All personnel report to battle stations. Zeke groaned, dragging a grease-streaked hand down his face. Oh, wonderful. Why can't it ever be something fun, like a surprise taco delivery? He grabbed his toolkit and ambled toward the nearest screen. Around him, mechanics abandoned their projects to cluster by the flickering display. When it blinked to life, the bay went dead silent. There, in high-definition doom, loomed a towering figure encased in armor that gleamed like midnight. Blood-red eyes stared out from a face that seemed carved from obsidian. His voice, low and imperious, reverberated like an earthquake. I am Supreme War Prince Zygal of the Kadhari Empire. For too long, Earth has polluted the galaxy with its mediocrity and chaos. The time for order has come. Surrender, or be annihilated. The feed cut. Zeke folded his arms, unimpressed. Let me guess, Tuesday. The intercom crackled. Commander Ryland's clipped tones cut through the silence. All hands, prepare for defensive maneuvers. Engineering teams, get the station combat ready. Zeke snorted. Combat ready? This tin can't survive lunch rush at the mess hall. Zeke, Lexi interjected, her voice uncharacteristically solemn, the Kadhari are one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Earth might not. Yeah, Zeke waved her off, already stalking toward the power grid room. They've got lasers and egos, I've got duct tape and spite. Let's see who wins. His stride was interrupted by Commander Ryland herself, the kind of leader who didn't walk so much as march through life. She planted herself in his path, all sharp angles and sharper eyes. Rodriguez, she snapped, we need volunteers for a recon mission. The Kadhari mothership is dangerously close, and we need intel on their systems. Now. Zeke glanced behind him, hoping for an escape. His co-workers, suddenly fascinated by ceiling rivets, took a unified step back, leaving him conspicuously alone. Cowards, he hissed under his breath. Why me? He protested, throwing his arms wide. I'm a mechanic, not James Bond. Ryland's gaze was as unyielding as her demeanor. Exactly. You're resourceful, insubordinate, and maddeningly good at solving problems. If anyone can crack alien tech and get back alive, it's you. Zeke blinked, then gestured toward his grease-stained overalls. Did the wrench not give away my total lack of espionage skills? Glad you're on board. Ryland ignored him and strode off, her boots clanging like the final nails in his coffin. Zeke turned back to the repair bay, grumbling louder than the station's failing engines. One of these days, I'm going to suck at my job just to avoid this crap. Back at his workstation, he tossed tools into his pack with more force than necessary. Lexi hovered nearby, her glow dimmed with what passed for concern in an AI. This mission has a high probability of failure. Are you sure? Sure? Nope. Resigned to terrible luck? Absolutely. He shoved Bessie into his bag, alongside duct tape and enough random gadgets to make MacGyver weep with pride. The station groaned as another distant explosion rattled the bulkheads. Zeke sighed and adjusted his cap, stepping into the shuttle with all the enthusiasm of a man boarding his own funeral pyre. All right, Cat Hari, he muttered under his breath, settling into the pilot's seat. Let's see how your shiny death trap handles one angry grease monkey with nothing to lose. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Zeke couldn't shake the feeling that today was either going to be the most spectacular day of his life, or his last. The command center of Orbital Station Alpha buzzed with desperate energy, a barely contained storm of fear and resolve. Dim lights cast long shadows across the faces of the crew, their eyes locked on the glowing holodisplays flashing surrender or die in every Cat Hari dialect known. Each crimson pulse of warning light seemed to hammer home the futility of resistance. Commander Ryland stood immovable at the heart of it all, her piercing gaze cutting through the chaos. Her broad shoulders and rigid posture radiated authority, but there was something else in her, an intensity, a fire, that refused to bow. The Cat Hari fleet filled the primary screen, a dark, predatory constellation of warships that seemed to mock human ingenuity. At their center loomed the flagship, a fortress of blackened steel and alien malice that blotted out the stars behind it. It wasn't just a warship, it was a statement. A promise of annihilation. At the back of the room, Zeke Rodriguez leaned on a railing, still finishing the last bite of his protein bar. You know, he called out, his tone far too casual for the moment, if this is a bad time, I can just go back to pretending the vending machines are my biggest problem. The room didn't laugh. Ryland's icy glare locked onto him with enough force to turn his smirk into a shrug. We've got about 6 minutes before that fleet decides to stop asking nicely, Ryland snapped. Her voice was a weapon, sharpened to precision. We need a plan, and we need it now. Zeke held up his hands. Hey, just trying to lighten the mood. You all look like someone canceled Christmas. Rodriguez, Ryland said, her tone a low growl. If you're not part of the solution, shut your damn mouth. He minded zipping his lips but muttered, if I save the day, I'm expecting an apology. And pie. Good pie. The tactical table glowed with schematics of the Cat Hari fleet, flickering over and over as analysts fumbled with options. None of them looked good. The silence stretched long enough for Zeke to feel the tension tightening around him like a vice. Then, Ryland spoke the words that sent the room into a collective shiver. We're infiltrating their flagship. Dead silence. It wasn't the stupid idea kind of silence, though. It was worse, the oh God, she means it kind of silence. Zeke leaned forward, eyebrows raised. I hate to be the voice of reason here, but that's a terrible plan. Like, objectively. Ryland didn't so much as blink. If you've got a better one, Rodriguez, now's the time. He hesitated, then gestured vaguely at the main display. What if we, I dunno, say we surrender, lure them in close, and then, boom. Trojan horse. Classic. They'd atomize us before we even sent the message, one of the analysts muttered. Details, Zeke shot back. Ryland's gaze turned to the room, her voice cutting through the air. We need a volunteer. Someone who can adapt, improvise, and get inside that ship without being disintegrated in the process. Eyes darted away. The floor, the ceiling, anywhere but at the commander. Then her gaze landed on Zeke. He froze mid-chew on what little was left of his protein bar. Wait. Hold on. Me? I'm not exactly spy material. Ryland's jaw tightened. You're an engineer. You think in ways they won't anticipate. You've hacked enemy systems in every drill. You're reckless, resourceful, and, frankly, just dumb enough to pull this off. Wow, thanks. Really feeling the love, Zeke muttered. In the back, Marshall, another mechanic, let out a laugh. Come on, Zeke. You're always bragging about how you can fix anything. Guess we'll see if that includes fixing an alien death fleet. Not funny, Zeke shot back. Not funny at all. Lexi, his AI assistant, chimed in through his earpiece. You know, statistically speaking, you are the most disposable. Gee, thanks, Lexi, Zeke hissed under his breath. Always a ray of sunshine. Rylan stepped closer, lowering her voice. Rodriguez, I wouldn't ask you if there was any other choice. But we're out of time. I'll have your back on comms, and the station will provide every bit of support we can. You're our best shot. Zeke's stomach churned as he stared at the flagship. It looked almost alive, its black hull gleaming with an oily sheen, its edges bristling with weapons that could carve a planet in half. It was a cathedral of destruction. If I die, he said finally, I want you all to know, my ghost will haunt the hell out of you. Rylan's lips twitched into the barest hint of a smile. Noted. An hour later, Zeke stood in the shuttle bay, his EVA suit gleaming with custom modifications, a Frankenstein's monster of tools, welders, and sensors. His heart pounded as the shuttle powered up around him. Lexi whispered in his ear. Last chance to chicken out, Zeke. Shut up, Lexi. You're supposed to be the voice of encouragement. I'm just managing expectations. The shuttle hatch hissed closed, and the engines roared to life. As the craft launched into the void, Zeke looked back at the station through the viewport. It already felt like a memory. All right, he muttered to himself. Not a hero. Never been a hero. But maybe I can fake it long enough to not die. The flagship loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette a black wound on the starlit canvas of space. Zeke clenched his fists, the enormity of what he was doing crashing down on him. Then he cracked a small, defiant grin. Let's go fix some aliens. The Kadhari mothership hung in the void like a knife poised above a throat, sharp, arrogant, and absurdly overcompensating. Its hull gleamed with jagged edges and glowing alien glyphs, the kind of design that screamed, "We're the bad guys, please shoot us first." Zeke Rodriguez, leaning casually against the bulkhead of his stolen transport, let out a snort. Who builds a spaceship that looks like it might stab itself if it took a corner too fast? They trying to compensate for something, Lexi? Inside his helmet, his AI assistant's voice was clipped and dry. Please refrain from antagonizing the giant death machine until we're no longer inside it. Dying because you can't whisper isn't the poetic end I envision for us. Relax, Lex. Zeke adjusted the stolen Kadhari uniform he'd wrestled onto his decidedly non-Cathari frame. The fabric itched, the boots were too tight, and the whole ensemble smelled faintly of sour milk. Nobody's going to notice me. I'm invisible. A shadow. You're a man in duct tape pretending to be a 7-foot-tall alien. A very loud shadow. Zeke ignored her. He pushed his maintenance cart down the massive docking bay ramp, his face a mask of feigned indifference. Around him, the Kadhari engineers, tall, silver skin, with glowing, predatory eyes, moved with hive-like precision, paying him only the briefest of glances. Just another worker bee in their gleaming hive. That's all they saw. And Zeke intended to keep it that way. The corridors of the ship were a triumph of form over function, sleek, sterile, and glowing with ethereal runes that hummed faintly in time with the ship's pulse. Zeke's every step echoed against the polished metal, his makeshift disguise feeling thinner with every alien he passed. Still, his trained eyes couldn't help but spot the flaws hidden beneath the ship's veneer of perfection. Who the hell runs a plasma relay next to a coolant pipe? He muttered under his breath, his gaze tracing the faint scorch marks around the junction. That's a meltdown waiting to happen. Amateurs. Zeke, Lexi warned, I don't think the universe will thank you for critiquing the Cathari's interior design choices. Sabotage his critique, he shot back, pausing at an access terminal. He pretended to check maintenance logs while his fingers slid a hacking device onto the console. The device blinked to life, mapping the ship's sprawling systems. A holographic overlay appeared in his visor, lines of data racing past like constellations caught in a hurricane. Zeke's grin widened. Oh, this is a mess. Power grids crisscrossed like spaghetti, coolant systems duct taped to who knows what, and, hang on. Are they seriously using quantum processors to control the bathroom doors? Lexi's pause was judgmental. Do you have to break everything? I mean, yeah. Zeke leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But first, I'm gonna make them regret building everything. Step 1 of the plan was elegant in its simplicity: break something critical. The energy regulation hub was a cavernous room filled with glowing conduits and pulsating alien tech that hummed ominously. Zeke sauntered up to a junction box that practically begged to be tampered with and pulled out Bessie, his trusty wrench. Time to say goodbye to your pew-pew juice, he muttered, twisting bolts with the flair of a man who knew exactly how to overdo it. Sparks flew as power was rerouted to the ship's ventilation system, causing it to overload spectacularly. Somewhere deep in the bowels of the mothership, a duct exploded with a resounding bang. Subtle, Lexi deadpanned. You want subtle, hire a spy. You want fun, you call me. By the time Zeke reached the Kadhari cafeteria, the chaos had started spreading like wildfire. Alarms blared. Engineers barked orders over the din of malfunctioning systems. And yet, Zeke wasn't finished. His latest masterpiece involved rerouting power from the fighter base launch systems to the food dispensers. The result was glorious: an explosion of gelatinous alien nutrient paste sprayed across the room, coating the sleek warriors in a slimy green film. He couldn't help but laugh as he slipped away, their furious shouts echoing behind him. Zeke, Lexi hissed, focus. The data core is... Relax. We're ahead of schedule, he interrupted, rounding a corner just in time to hear an ominous announcement echo through the ship's intercom. Attention, we have an intruder. Deploy the obsidian talons. Zeke froze. Obsidian talons? Seriously? What are they, a boy band? Lexi's voice dropped to a deadly monotone. They're assassins. Specifically trained to hunt intruders like you. Awesome. Zeke hefted Bessie onto his shoulder. Guess I'll have to give them a backstage pass. The talons were fast, silent, and terrifyingly efficient. Unfortunately for them, so was Zeke's grease trap. He rigged a maintenance drone to release a stream of pressurized lubricant as the talons rounded a corner, and the ensuing carnage was nothing short of poetic. The sleek, deadly warriors went down like bowling pins, their curses a symphony of frustration. Maybe next time, they'll train for that, Zeke quipped, disappearing into the maze of corridors before reinforcements arrived. Finally, he reached the heart of the ship, the central control room. The chamber was vast, dominated by a glowing crystalline core that pulsed with an eerie light. Zeke crouched in the shadows, watching as Kadhari officers scrambled to respond to the chaos he'd unleashed. Lexi, he whispered, his grin practically feral, mark this moment. This is where it gets fun. Before she could respond, Zeke vaulted over the railing and landed in the control room like a wrecking ball with a wrench. All eyes turned to him. Hi, he said, twirling Bessie like a gunslinger. I'm here to fix what's not broken. And with that, the destruction began anew. Zeke had never fancied himself a fugitive, but crouching behind the towering cooling unit in the belly of the Kadhari mothership, he realized the galaxy didn't care much for his self-assessments. The cold hum of alien machinery pulsed through the floor plates, blending with the faint whir of his own racing heart. He clutched Bessie, his trusty wrench, close to his chest. It wasn't much, but it had saved his skin more times than he could count. Zeke, he muttered under his breath, his lips curling into a dry smirk, you've really outdone yourself this time. The whisper of boots on the metal flooring cut his self-pity short. They were closing in, no ordinary grunts either. These were obsidian talons, Kadhari elite. The kind of soldiers mothers warn their kids about in bedtime stories. Lethal, relentless, and annoyingly punctual. Lexi, he whispered hoarsely, his throat dry. Status update? Her voice crackled through his earpiece, calm and steady despite the chaos. They're 2 corridors down and closing fast. I'd recommend moving. Unless, of course, you'd like to test your mettle against genetically enhanced super soldiers. Thanks for the pep talk, Lex, he quipped, craning his neck around the corner. The talons' black and crimson armor glinted faintly in the sterile light. They marched with robotic precision, rifles held tight against their shoulders. Any bright ideas? He asked, shifting his weight. Or am I supposed to take them on with a wrench and some old-fashioned human gumption? Your sarcasm is noted, Lexi replied smoothly. I suggest you use the maintenance shafts. It's not elegant, but neither are you. Touché, Zeke grunted, prying open a hatch with practiced ease. He slid inside, the confined space forcing him onto his belly. The sharp, metallic tang of recycled air filled his nose as he crawled forward, listening to the muffled echoes of pursuit above. They wouldn't expect him to take the maintenance routes. They never did. The Kadhari, for all their technological brilliance, had a blind spot for human ingenuity, or desperation. Zeke had both in spades. The Talon's footsteps faded, replaced by the rhythmic clink of his own movements. He couldn't stop, couldn't rest. Not until he reached the core. Not until the ship was ash. The Kadhari thought they could roll over humanity, enslave and conquer like it was their birthright. But Zeke? He knew their secrets. Their weaknesses. Every damn vent and circuit on the ship was a thread he could pull. Lexi, he murmured, pausing to catch his breath. How much time do I have before they catch on? Not enough to take a nap, if that's what you're asking, she replied dryly. They're rerouting squads to seal off the core. You need to move faster. Faster, Zeke echoed, shaking his head. Yeah, I'll just grow a third long while I'm at it. A faint light ahead marked another exit. Peeking through the grate, Zeke saw lone Talon standing guard. The warrior's stance was impeccable, every movement a calculated display of readiness. Yet Zeke could see the arrogance in the rigid posture, the overconfidence in the slight swivel of his head. Talons weren't used to real resistance. They were used to victories handed to them on a silver platter. He grinned. Let's see how you handle a little turbulence. Hacking into the ship's system was child's play for someone who'd spent half his life patching together junkyard tech. A few keystrokes later, the hallway's lights flickered, then died, plunging everything into darkness. The Talon stiffened, his visor glowing faintly as he activated night vision. Zeke used the cover to slip through the grate, landing silently. The Talon's voice came through the filtered hiss of his helmet. Unknown disturbance. Investigating. Yeah, you do that, Zeke muttered. He lobbed a maintenance drone toward the soldier, its lights flashing in a chaotic frenzy. The Talon turned, firing instinctively. Zeke seized the moment, charging forward with Bessie raised high. The wrench came down hard, striking the Talon's shoulder. The impact made the warrior stumble but didn't drop him. Zeke cursed under his breath. Figures. The Talon recovered with inhuman speed, swinging his rifle like a club. Zeke ducked just in time, rolling past the blow. He came up behind the soldier and delivered a vicious kick to the back of the knee. The Talon went down, his armor clanging against the floor. Not so tough without your buddies, are you? Zeke taunted, already sprinting toward another hatch. As he slipped into the vent, the Talon's voice followed him, low and menacing. You can't hide forever, human. Zeke chuckled darkly, his breath ragged but triumphant. Who said anything about hiding? He disappeared into the labyrinth of the ship, his grin widening. The Kadhari thought they had him cornered. They didn't realize they'd just let the fox into the henhouse. And Zeke? He wasn't planning to leave until the whole damn coop was burning. Zeke stood in the heart of the Kadhari mothership's nerve center, a cathedral of alien supremacy carved in shimmering black alloys that drank the light and pulsed with a cold, mechanical heartbeat. The air thrummed with power, every monitor streaming alien glyphs and battle data too advanced for any mere human to parse. But Zeke wasn't any mere human. He stood there, cocky grin plastered on his face, wrench in hand. To him, all this alien brilliance was just one giant invitation for chaos. And chaos was where humanity thrived. Zeke, Lexi's voice buzzed in his ear, her tone as sharp as the blade of his sarcasm. You're out of your depth. The Kadhari are aware of your presence. I recommend. Recommending won't stop me, Lexi, Zeke interrupted, already prying open a maintenance panel on the main console. The day I take advice from an AI is the day I quit drinking coffee. And you know that's never happening. A faint, mechanical sigh. You've tampered with the ship's coffee systems before. I'd call that evidence against you. Zeke snickered, fingers dancing through the alien wiring like a concert pianist teasing out a melody. Come on, admit it. You've never seen a species as creative with caffeine as humans. A snap of a cable. Sparks. The screens flared crimson, bathing the room in a warning glow. Alarms screamed to life. Somewhere deeper in the ship, Kadhari engineers would be panicking, scrambling to decipher what was happening. Zeke glanced at the chaos he'd just unleashed and whistled low. Yup. Just the right amount of overkill. But before he could savor his masterpiece, the doors hissed open with a bone-shaking clang. Zeke turned to see him, Zygal, supreme war prince of the Kadhari Empire. 7 feet of chitinous menace encased in obsidian armor, with a plasma sword humming at his side like the promise of death. Human, Zygal hissed, his yellow eyes narrowing to slits. I wondered how long your pathetic species would defy us before sending an insect to infest my ship. Zeke straightened, deliberately casual. Wow, Zygal. That's a lot of words for I'm angry you broke my toy. Don't worry. You'll live, assuming you can afford a decent plumber after this. Zygal didn't laugh. His plasma sword ignited, its ethereal blue blade casting an unholy glow. Your kind doesn't understand its place. Allow me to educate you. Zeke gave a mock shrug. I'd rather not, teach. You know how humans are about authority. Zygal charged. Zeke ducked under the first swing, the plasma blade slicing through the air where his head had been an instant before. The heat singed his hair, but Zeke barely flinched. He twisted away, grabbing a loose maintenance drone and hurling it into Zygal's path. The war prince sliced it in two mid-flight, sparks showering the room in a fiery arc. Nice swordplay, Zeke called, skidding to the weapons console. Bet you're great at kebabs. Too bad I'm more of a grill guy myself. His hands flew over the controls, bypassing Kadhari firewalls like a chef flipping pancakes. Systems blinked offline one after another, plasma cannons, targeting arrays, missile guidance. The Kadhari mothership was being systematically declawed, and Zeke wasn't stopping. Enough! Zygal roared, his voice shaking the walls. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his sword arcing down toward Zeke's spine. Zeke pivoted, narrowly dodging, then swung Bessie, his trusty wrench, straight into a nearby conduit. The feedback overloaded, sending a burst of electricity spiraling out like angry vipers. Zygal recoiled, shielding his face as Zeke scrambled clear. You're persistent, Zeke said, hopping onto a console. Points for effort, buddy. But we humans? We specialized in the impossible. Zygal advanced again, plasma sword blazing. You'll pay for this insolence. I'll mount your bones as a trophy on the bow of the ship. Zeke snorted. See, that's your problem. Always with the drama. Me? I just hit the right button. With a flourish, he slammed a fist down on the final control panel. The weapons system went dead. Every monitor blinked to black. The Cathari's entire fleet, once poised to conquer Earth, had just been reduced to a bunch of very expensive paperweights. Zygal froze, staring at the lifeless systems. His sword flickered uncertainly. What have you done? Zeke grinned, dusting off his hands. Oh, nothing much. Just gave your ship a little existential crisis. The war prince roared, lunging one last time, but Zeke was already moving. He grabbed a fire suppression nozzle, blasted Zygal in the face with foam, and darted for the exit. Behind him, alarms continued to scream, and the control room buckled under the strain of its own sabotage. Pausing at the doorway, Zeke glanced back at the foam-drenched war prince and couldn't help himself. By the way, you might want to check the plumbing. Rerouted half your coolant to the bathrooms. It's gonna get messy. With a wink, he was gone, sprinting down the alien corridor toward freedom. Behind him, Zygal's furious roar echoed through the ship, but Zeke? He just laughed. Another day, another victory for human ingenuity. And yeah, a little bit of chaos. The control room of the Kadhari mothership was everything Zeke had imagined, and more. A stark, cold environment of polished metal, blinking lights, and a faint hum that echoed through the thick air. Zeke crouched behind a massive console, watching the chaos unfold through a small viewport. Sparks flew from the circuitry he'd just fried, and the last of the station's power grid flickered like a dying star. He could almost hear the groan of the system as it surrendered to his sabotage. But Zygle wasn't going to take this lying down. The door to the control room slammed open with a force that sent a tremor through the floor. Zeke barely had time to duck behind the nearest panel before the War Prince himself strode into the room, his obsidian armor gleaming under the artificial lighting. Zygle was everything Zeke had expected, tall, imposing, with an aura of unrelenting authority. He moved like a predator, his helmet glinting with malice. "You," Zygle's voice boomed, distorted through the speakers in his helmet. "I've seen the damage you've done. You've taken the first step toward your death, human." Zeke grinned, pulling Bessie from his tool belt with a dramatic flourish. The old wrench, with its battered and dented head, was the only weapon he trusted. Yeah, save the villain speech for later. Right now, I'm just trying to finish my job," he shot back, aiming the wrench at a nearby console. "This place is like a giant piñata, and I'm the one with the stick." Zygle's eyes narrowed behind his helmet. He unsheathed a plasma blade with a hiss, the blue glow casting an eerie light across the room. "I'll give you one chance, human. Surrender now, and I'll make it quick. You're outmatched, outclassed, and out of your depth." Zeke tilted his head, considering the offer. "Nah, I'm good. I've got more important things to do than get killed by an overgrown toaster." He gestured at the blade, then at the malfunctioning tech around them. "Honestly, if you're going to threaten someone, you might want to try using your brain instead of that sword. Looks like your ship's held together by duct tape and hope." Zygle's eyes flashed with fury. With a single, fluid motion, he charged. The plasma blade whistled through the air, slashing toward Zeke's head in a deadly arc. But Zeke wasn't there. He ducked just in time, the blade missing his scalp by inches. Zygle's momentum carried him forward, and Zeke took advantage, kicking the nearest control panel. The sparks ignited a burst of static that temporarily overloaded the ship's shields, sending a ripple through the air. Zygle faltered. "That all you got, big guy?" Zeke taunted, ducking behind a support pillar and reeling in Bessie with both hands. "I've fought more dangerous opponents in my sleep, and they didn't need a lightsaber to get the job done." Zygle recovered quickly, his patience wearing thin. With a guttural growl, he leapt toward Zeke, this time swinging the blade in a wide arc to force the mechanic into a corner. But Zeke had other plans. As Zygle's blade came crashing down, Zeke kicked over a small maintenance cart, sending it rolling directly into Zygle's path. The War Prince's foot caught the edge of the cart, and he stumbled just enough to miss the strike. Zeke grinned, his eyes flashing with mischief. "Don't you just love basic physics?" he called. Zygle, seething, snarled. "You're an insect, crawling around in places you don't belong." "Yep. And like an insect, I know how to buzz around until I hit your weak spots." Zeke rolled out from behind the pillar and leaped into action. With a loud clang, Bessie struck the nearest conduit, sending a jolt of electricity through the control room. The lights flickered once more, and Zygle, momentarily disoriented, swung wildly. Zeke took the opening. He charged forward, wrench raised high, and slammed it into the side of Zygle's armor. The impact reverberated through the room with a satisfying clang, but it wasn't enough to bring the War Prince down. Zygle's expression twisted with fury, and with a roar, he thrust the plasma blade toward Zeke's chest. Zeke sidestepped with a well-practiced roll, narrowly avoiding the lethal strike. As he tumbled to his feet, he grabbed the nearest piece of debris, a dislodged panel, and hurled it at Zygle's head. The object slammed into his shoulder, and for a split second, Zygle hesitated, throwing off his balance just long enough for Zeke to dart forward. With one swift motion, Zeke yanked out a piece of the exposed wiring from a nearby terminal and jabbed it directly into Zygle's chest plate. Sparks flew as the circuit fried, and Zygle let out a howl of pain. The blade dropped from his hand. Zeke didn't wait for a second invitation. He slammed Bessie into the War Prince's armor one last time, knocking him back against the control panel. The room shook violently as the Kadhari ship's systems started to shut down in response to Zeke's sabotage. "You are a nuisance," Zygle spat, his voice low and dangerous, but his movements slowed. Zeke stood over him, breathing heavily, holding Bessie like a prize. "Yeah, well, I'm not really here to be your punching bag. I've got a station to save." With that, he turned, leaving the War Prince groaning on the floor. Behind him, the control room lights began to dim further, signaling that the ship was on the brink of failure. As Zeke made his way to the door, he smirked. "You might want to find a new hobby, Zygle. This invasion thing? Totally not working for you." And with that, he was gone, leaving behind a ship in chaos and a defeated War Prince. The Kadhari mothership groaned, metal shrieking against metal as Zeke Rodriguez sprinted down a smoke-filled corridor. Every step felt like a gamble. Would the floor hold, or would it give way into the fiery chaos below? His lungs burned, his fingers trembling as he clutched his toolkit like a lifeline. Behind him, a chain of explosions rippled through the ship's core. Zeke didn't look back. He didn't have to. He could feel the destruction chasing him. The cramped cockpit of the shuttle was barely big enough for him and his thoughts. Slamming into the pilot's seat, he shoved his toolkit aside and threw the engine switches. The console flickered to life, crackling with static as the ship itself seemed to groan in protest. "Lexi," Zeke barked, slamming the thrusters into overdrive. "Tell me how much longer this flying scrap heap has." The AI's voice was maddeningly calm, cutting through the din based on current damage patterns. Total core collapse in approximately 5 minutes and 16 seconds. "Perfect," Zeke muttered, punching the throttle. Plenty of time for a grand finale. Behind him, the mothership convulsed, its once imposing silhouette marred by cascading fires and sparking ruptures. What had been a beacon of Kadhari superiority now resembled a dying star, collapsing under its own weight. Zeke had made sure of that, a little sabotage here, a little overload there. The shuttle's engines roared, blasting him into the cold embrace of space. Through the viewport, he caught the death throes of the behemoth he'd dismantled. The reactor finally let go, a burst of white-hot energy consuming the ship from within. For a moment, it was beautiful, a catastrophic ballet of light and debris scattering like fireflies into the void. But Zeke didn't have time to admire his handiwork. The Kadhari fleet had noticed. "Lexi," he snapped, "status on enemy reinforcements?" "Remaining Kadhari vessels are retreating," Lexi reported. Her tone softened, almost amused. "You appear to have disrupted their command structure." "Disrupted?" Zeke let out a rough laugh. "Try shattered. Patch me through to Earth. Full broadcast. Let's give them a show. Connecting now." The static cleared, and Zeke's voice carried across every comm frequency outside. He leaned forward, grinning like a man who'd just cheated death, and won. "This is Zeke Rodriguez, your friendly neighborhood mechanic. If you're wondering about that big, beautiful light show in orbit, that was me." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Yeah, you heard right. Some grease monkey with a wrench named Bessie just crippled the Kadhari flagship and sent the rest of their fleet packing." He could already picture the stunned faces back home. "Perfect. Let them chew on that." The comm crackled as Commander Ryland's voice broke through, barely audible over the chaos. "Zeke? What the hell just happened up there?" "The Kadhari fleet, they're scattering." "Did you?" "Damn straight I did," Zeke interrupted, his grin widening. "Gave their mothership a little makeover. Let's just say they won't be invading anything for a while." Ryland's voice pitched higher, disbelief dripping from every word. "You're telling me you sabotaged an entire mothership alone?" Zeke shrugged, though no one could see him. "Wasn't easy, but hey, they don't call me Rodriguez the Reckless for nothing. No one calls you that." "They will after today," Zeke quipped, cutting the line before Ryland could argue. No time for bureaucratic debriefs. His work wasn't done yet. The shuttle hummed, its systems stabilizing as Zeke leaned back, finally exhaling. Then, a flicker on the radar caught his eye, a lone Kadhari warship, limping away from the battlefield. Its engines sputtered, a wounded predator dragging itself to safety. Zeke's smirk returned. Lexi, you see what I see? Affirmative, the AI replied. Would you like me to arm the weapon systems? Nah, Zeke said, cracking his knuckles. I've got something better in mind. He maneuvered the shuttle into position, fingers flying across the console as he locked onto the Kathari vessel's primary cooling vent. A few keystrokes, a little creative rerouting of their systems, and boom! The warship erupted, a final bloom of fire that faded into the dark. Zeke leaned back, satisfied. Now it's done, he murmured. As he set course for Orbital Station Alpha, he let himself relax for the first time in hours. The Earth was safe. The Kathari fleet was in shambles. And Zeke Rodriguez? He was just a guy with a wrench, a killer sense of timing, and one hell of a story to tell. The lights of Orbital Station Alpha sputtered, casting jagged shadows across the repair bay. The air reeked of scorched wiring and stale coffee, and the low rumble of the station's engines was punctuated by the occasional whine of something struggling not to fail. Zeke Rodriguez didn't care. He had grease on his hands, sweat on his brow, and Bessie, the old wrench with more stories than he cared to admit, back in his grip. This was where he belonged. The clang of Bessie hitting the grated floor rang out like a bell, followed by the hiss of coolant finally conceding defeat. Zeke leaned against the battered workbench, wiping his forehead with a sleeve already soaked in grime. He chuckled under his breath. Another day, another catastrophe narrowly averted by duct tape and raw determination. Yeah, he muttered, surveying the mess. That'll hold. Probably. Then came the applause. Slow, deliberate, and insufferably smug. Zeke froze. Of course. Standing in the doorway, Commander Ryland was all sharp smiles and unrelenting authority. Her entourage of station bigwigs flanked her, their polished uniforms and clean hands making them look like aliens in this den of sweat and labor. Zeke sighed. He already knew what was coming. Zeke Rodriguez, Ryland drawled, stepping into the bay like she owned the place, which, to be fair, she practically did. Savior of Earth. Hero of the Kathari conflict. A man who can't seem to avoid being in the right place at the wrong time. Zeke groaned, dragging a hand down his face. Oh, come on, Ryland. Can't I just fix pipes in peace? Do we have to do this now? Ryland's grin widened. We could have waited, but you have a knack for slipping off station when no one's looking. I wanted to make sure you heard this in person. She turned to her entourage with a flourish. Ladies and gentlemen, the man who took down a Kathari warship armed with nothing but ingenuity and bad luck. The group chuckled, but Zeke wasn't laughing. He reached down, grabbing Bessie and twirling her idly. Let me guess. You've got another special assignment for me. Something suicidal and vaguely heroic? Not quite, Ryland said, her smile softening into something almost genuine. We're offering you a promotion. Zeke froze mid-spin. A promotion. The words hit him like a wrench to the temple. He looked at her, hoping she was joking, but Ryland's expression told him she wasn't. She was dead serious. Yeah, no, Zeke said immediately, tossing Bessie onto the workbench with a loud thunk. Not my thing. Thanks, though. Ryland raised an eyebrow. You haven't even heard the details. I don't need to. I'm not cut out for that kind of thing. I'm a grease monkey, Commander. A wrench jockey. Promotions come with meetings, paperwork, and a whole lot of other crap I want no part of. Ryland's tone sharpened. This isn't just about you, Rodriguez. You've become a symbol. Earth's entering a new era, and people need someone to look up to. Someone to fix their problems? Zeke interrupted. I'm already doing that. Broken pipes, malfunctioning reactors, busted alien tech, you name it, I'm on it. I don't need a fancy title to do my job. You don't get it, do you? Ryland's voice was quieter now, but the intensity behind it burned brighter. You're not just a mechanic anymore. You're the guy who stood up when the galaxy was falling apart. People need hope, Zeke. And whether you like it or not, you're it. Zeke stared at her, the weight of her words pressing down like a collapsing bulkhead. He didn't feel like a hero. Heroes wore capes, gave speeches, and basked in adoration. Zeke? He wore coveralls, argued with a mouthy AI, and prayed every morning that nothing else on the station would explode. Lexi's voice chimed in from his shoulder, dripping with digital sarcasm. I tried to warn you, Zeke. Hero status is a one-way ticket to bureaucratic hell. I suggest we both self-destruct before the meetings start. Helpful as always, Lexi, Zeke muttered, rubbing his temples. He turned back to Ryland. Look, Commander. I get what you're saying, but I'm not the guy you're looking for. I'm just the guy who fixes things when they break. Ryland studied him for a long moment, then nodded, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. All right, Rodriguez. You win, for now. But the galaxy has a funny way of dragging people like you into the spotlight, whether they want it or not. Don't say I didn't warn you. As she turned to leave, Zeke let out a long breath. The bay was quiet again, save for the soft hum of the station around him. He reached for Bessie, running his fingers along the worn grooves in the handle. She was dependable, reliable. She didn't ask for applause or promotions. She just got the job done. Zeke smirked to himself. Maybe he wasn't a hero. But if saving the universe meant patching pipes and jury-rigging alien tech, he'd keep doing it. One broken thing at a time. All right, Galaxy, he muttered, gripping Bessie tight. Let's see what else you've got. And with that, Zeke Rodriguez got back to work.